All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Tonight is Wednesday, August 11th, 2021. This is your evening tropical update. Apologies for the late recording. Had a lot going on today. Couldn't get home till late. This will be a quick video. We're not going to go all in the weeds tonight. Be about 5 minutes or so. We're still tracking Tropical Depression Fred tonight, located over Hispaniola, as well as Invest 95L back over the Central Atlantic. Both these systems are worth talking about, and we'll start with Fred. Fred did basically truck right into Hispaniola today, as we expected. As we talked about last night, today wasn't really going to be a very eventful day. Fred got up a little more organized right before landfall as it moved in. It finally had a little bit better organization, had about 45 or so mile-an-hour winds, and then it smacked into these big old mountains, and it is not having the best time. The surface circulation tonight is probably somewhere right about here, maybe just starting to exit. There's a little swirl of the clouds. It's not a whole lot, but most of the deep thunderstorm activity is being shoved off to the south as you have mountains kind of holding the storms up, and they're pushing against that mountain, and that's forcing them aloft. It's called orographic lift, is what can fuel thunderstorms over mountainous terrain, but that's not helping Fred because the center of the storm is moving away from all the circulation while the mountains are blocking the rest of the storm trying to move up. So this is why Hispaniola is so deadly to these storms. Is it basically rips them apart. It's very difficult. Sometimes they can surprise you and they can kind of like do something like this and move around, or we were worried about Fred reforming further north. It's not entirely impossible still, but it doesn't appear that's what Fred is trying to do, at least right now. So it's going to be critical by tomorrow afternoon where exactly Fred is. Is it really close to? Is the center close to Cuba? Has it already wandered further north? It'll kind of depend exactly where this thing shakes out, but it's going to be significantly disrupted, as is what it appears tonight. And that plays into the future of what is now tropical depression Fred as it moves out. You can see here Hurricane Center eventually does expect this to re-strengthen to a tropical storm by Friday, but even that might be kind of generous at this point because Fred is also about to smack into an upper level low. We talked about that right hook, left hook kind of thing. It took one hook from the island, and then as soon as it leaves there, there's an upper level low over Florida that's pushing this kind of west southwest flow over the region. So it's going to go from being ripped, all the thunderstorms ripped off of it, immediately into an area of wind shear. Now, this isn't terribly high wind shear, but if your storm is already really weak and ragged, this can really be detrimental to the storm. So, bottom line, Fred is going to absolutely struggle for the next couple days, and it's going to be interesting to see if it can reform. If any sort of decent vortex can hold on and any sort of organized skeleton of a storm can survive until about Saturday afternoon, that is when we could see potential for re-strengthening. That also assumes it takes a little more westerly path and stays over the waters of the Gulf of Mexico and the Straits of Florida. If Fred takes any more of a northerly path and moves into Florida, it's probably game over for anything intense, and it'll just be a big wet rainmaker for the coast for the Florida Peninsula, which is very likely anyway. I think almost any scenario we get now, Florida's peninsula is probably going to see some heavy rain, especially on the western coast of the state and into the Panhandle by early next week, and then eventually recurving up here. And then if it actually intensifies, then obviously there'll be more rain and whatnot for the west coast, maybe a little bit less for the east coast. But regardless, a bunch of moisture is coming, whether that's an organized storm or just a big mess, we're not really sure yet. But I can tell you tonight, Fred's got a long road ahead of it and a very arduous road ahead of it. So I would be impressed at this point if Fred was able to recover and become a 60, 65-mile-an-hour tropical storm. As the Hurricane Center still has, you'll probably see this forecast come down a little bit more, and then they'll kind of taper the expectations as we see what we have tomorrow with Fred. So again, keep watching it tonight. We'll know more tomorrow. I wouldn't be super worried about it still. But just know that even though the ceiling's a little lower than it was, it's still not nothing, as this could still be a re-strengthening tropical storm in a few days if Fred can manage to play its cards right. Fred isn't the only storm in the Atlantic, though. Tonight we have Invest 95L following Fred. This is a tropical wave that came off Africa a couple days ago, and it is still moving to the west about 10 to 15 miles an hour. A little disorganized today. I was going to loop the satellite, but it's kind of jacked up. Low level center of circulation of the storm is kind of here, but it's kind of also elongated, and then a lot of thunderstorm activity to the south. There's some sinking dry air over the storm, and that's kind of putting a little bit of wind shear on the storm and kind of drying out the northern half. But this wave will generally tumble along for a couple days, and the concern for this wave is once it gets into the Eastern Caribbean, the conditions will be pretty favorable. There'll be a nice high pressure cell in this region aloft, and there'll be a lot of moist air and very warm water as it approaches. So it looks like this one may have a better chance to develop than Fred does. In fact, it's kind of odd that it hasn't already developed more than it has, given the changing background state. But I think these two waves were just a little early for what the Atlantic can really do in the next couple of weeks. But regardless, 95L is going to generally follow what Fred is doing in some capacity. This is the latest ensemble guidance for our global computer models. Both of them generally take this thing somewhere into the Eastern Caribbean. European not really on board yet. GFS definitely expects a storm of some intensity, but most of their models are weak. But you can see a few members already a little stronger and a little bit further to the south and west. This depends a lot where if the storm keeps its center up here and reforms, or if the center eventually comes down here where all the thunderstorm activity is. And then, for example, instead of starting from this point, you start from this point and then you push this down further to the Gulf. And the thing with the Gulf of Mexico and whatnot is if a storm gets about here, then there's really not a whole lot of other places for it to go than the Gulf and to Florida or into Mexico. So 95L, what eventually will probably be grace in a couple days. Looks like, probably within this time frame is where it's probably going to actually develop in about 2 or 3 days. And then you'll have a tropical storm or something of some intensity moving into the Caribbean Sea. So this is one to watch. We have time. We have more time we do for Fred. But Fred could just be kind of a precursor to what this one may be. And then, of course, there's yet another wave coming off Africa as the train's begun, the season's clicked into high gear. I mean, we're in it now, so we're going to see a couple storms in the next couple weeks for sure. Nothing much else going on in the tropics tonight. We have two tropical storms in the Pacific or Eastern Pacific. Both these are moving away. Linda will become a hurricane, but Kevin's already on the downturn, and Linda is going to strengthen for a couple days and then weaken. Both these moving out to sea. And Tropical Depression 16 has crept into the Joint Typhoon Warning Center's Western Pacific area, but should stay weak for several days. It tracks near Guam, and then some models do eventually strengthen it in about 4 or 5 days. But for now, it's in the open Pacific, and not much to worry about anytime soon. So that's what I got for you guys this evening. A tropical update. We'll be back tomorrow with the latest. So until then, thanks for watching and have a good one.